I got to tell you, for anybody who has not fished Newfoundland, it's in a totally separate category, and it's not just about the fish.
But what really sets Newfoundland apart is its people. Newfoundlanders are some of the kindest, most welcoming folks that you're ever going to meet. Of course, you're always a guest of honor when you're in the company of a celebrated Canadian hero. And I'm lucky to be here with one of Canada's greatest sons, retired General Rick Hillier, former Chief of Defense for the Canadian military, and a card-carrying Newfie. But this ain't just any how is you by large tundra and stay where you're at and I'll come where you to run-of-the-mill Newfoundlander. No, this is General Rick Hillier, highest-ranking Newfoundland officer in Canadian history, Chief of NATO Stabilization Forces in Bosnia, Commander of the NATO-led International Security Force in Afghanistan, a best-selling author, a respected public speaker, Chancellor of Memorial University, and one heck of a cod-jigger to boot.
Cod jigger, look at him.
Hey, what can I say to that? Cod jigging is my favorite sport of all. My goodness.
Welcome to the show, Rick. Pleasure to have you here. As Gord just said before, the day before, probably, I think, in a lot of cases, the most important day in Canadian history, and certainly the most important holiday, if we can call it that. And here you are. What I believe is the most important person on Remembrance Day. You've done so much for the troops, both when you were leading them, but the part that most people don't know, you've done so much work behind the scenes since then in making sure that they get their just rewards. And you're on the cusp of doing something even more spectacular than just about anything you've ever done before for the troops. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. But it's an absolute honor.
And he's looking rather dapper, I might add, too. Right?
Yeah, really.
As I said to you guys, I just sit around the house nighttime dressed like this, right? It is the day before Remembrance Day. It is a remembrance show, your episode for Remembrance. So I thought it only appropriate to wear, the decorations that my nation has awarded to me for that service, and as a representative then of all those incredible sons and daughters who served our nation. And Gord mentioned his father and his grandfather. My goodness, what a record of service in his family. The Battle of the Somme. You think about pure terror and loss and fear and fright, and Canadians served there and excelled and learnt lessons, which then enabled them just 6 months later to be enormously successful taking Vimy Ridge. I mean, that's where they learned the lessons on what they were going to do and what tactics to use and how to tie the artillery to those tactics and how to move and fire in movement as opposed to just stand up and walk, and how to get up close to the enemy by using those tunnels and so many other things. They learned it at the Battle of the Somme. And then to be a wireless gunner and communicator on one of those aircraft, you imagine going over enemy territory, being fired at all the time by flak guns, night fighters waiting to come up and shoot you into little pieces, and doing it night after night after night after night. Yeah. Incredible service. What a legacy of service in his family.
And Rick, these were kids. These were kids. That's the other part that blows my mind. Every time I read something or watch something of that era and who was representing us and standing up for our freedom, were kids. These were young men, young ladies. They weren't people our age. They were kids.
Well, Angelo, the first thing is people our age can't handle that physical regime. You just cannot do it. Yeah. I remember one of my regiment's leaders from the war talking about, he said, we said the guys in the 4th Division, they were all old guys. Like they had battalion commanders who were 27, 28 years old. And we're looking around and saying, this really? Seriously? And the other thing is that you want young men and women because they're the ones who accomplish things, right? And so I said one time, if you take a young platoon commander, a man or a woman commanding 40 soldiers, and you take a 20-year-old platoon commander and say, you and your platoon take that hill, and he'll take the hill or she'll take the hill with their platoon. And then once they get to the top, they might look around and say, hey, that was stupid. If you say that to a 40-year-old platoon commander, that platoon commander will stand with the platoon at the bottom of the hill and say, hey, that's stupid. You want the
Yeah.
former, not the latter. You want somebody who will do the job and do it well and sees it, who has no reverse. And that's youth. Youth is the bloodline of an army for sure.
I
You know
don't
what?
care.
When Rick was talking about when Gordy's ancestry people were in the wars and that, and the good part was the survive. That gunner is a survivor. He survived. His grandfather survived. Whatever. But I bet you the worst part, Rick, you know all about this, is all your friends around you have to try and think the same way, but you lose a lot of those friends too in that game, right? In real war, you're losing your.
Well, you do, and you know, on Remembrance Day now, you think about those that lost. You know, we had the war in Afghanistan. We lost a lot of fine young Canadians there. 158 soldiers killed there. We had more than 2,000 wounded physically, thousands more mentally, and you think about those also. Throughout our history, we have at 120,000 of Canada's sons and daughters who have given their life in service to Canada and to us, and to all three of us and our families and everybody else.
Wow.
And you think about those tomorrow, and you go to those British Commonwealth cemeteries in northern France and Belgium, and you see those cemeteries, and they're so neat and orderly and dignified and respectful and serene and devastatingly brutal, because there's just one after another of the graves of our sons and in some cases daughters, and say, hey, they gave us this awesome country, right? And we should remember that, because if we don't remember, we're often doomed to repeat the mistakes that happened before. We don't want to do that.
I've asked you on air before this question, Rick. I'll ask it of you again. Obviously, we just saw the outpouring of folks putting up messages on screen and how much respect they have for you and the Canadian soldiers and all that stuff. And I've asked you this before. How are we doing as a nation, though, on the global platform in terms of respecting our veterans and you know, maintaining that sense of pride of what these young folks did for us? How do we match up to some of the other countries that had kind of the same history as we did?
Well, I think first of all, most countries with which we soldiered, the Australians, the British, the Americans, and the French and Germans, we've all had difficulty in being able to give our veterans the same kind of support that our veterans gave us as a nation. And you know, they signed that unlimited liability contract, and they lived up to that contract, sometimes losing their lives, sometimes being horribly wounded physically, and other times, as I mentioned, mentally. And they paid a terrible price for that. And we've not been particularly great at looking after them since. We're improving every day, I believe. I fundamentally believe that, but we've still got a heck of a long way to go. And sometimes it is not just the care itself and the programs itself. It is the psychology of not feeling valued. And I don't think we've had governments or ministers of Veterans Affairs or organizations that have made those veterans feel like their service was incredibly valued. And you know, and that then spreads throughout the veteran community. And you get people who feel smaller, or feel they wasted their life in some respects. And we try to convince them that's not true. But you got to make them feel valued. We have not been successful at that.
To me, it's a no-brainer. I've told you this before. I don't understand any government or any official, any politician who would stand in the way of giving every possible support that's available to us for our veterans. And yet it happens all the time. You just mentioned it now. To me, it's a no-brainer. How can they close their eyes? How can they not? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it takes leadership to change that. Secondly, it's the energy of everyday life that catches people up. And thirdly, is those veterans are far from the eyes, far from view of the normal Canadian community. Most people don't even know a veteran. And if they hear of them, it's occasionally. And so we've not really been good at that. You know, Rudyard Kipling, 100 and something years ago, wrote a poem about, during times of war, God and the soldier are both adored. And during times of peace, God and the soldier are both ignored. Well, we're in times of peace. The soldiers are not out there putting their life on the line in most cases. There are some exceptions. And as a result, they've kind of largely disappeared from the view of most Canadians.
Unbelievable.
There is no constituency that supports those veterans by and large, because they've disappeared from view. And, there are some good programs and organizations out there. I do work with, True Patriot Love, to try and support soldiers and their families with some awesome programs, and let them know that the love is there, that the appreciation is there. But Team Rubicon Canada, that provides a way for veterans to come back together into the kinds of teams they had in the military, and then help other Canadians or else people around the world during natural disasters such as hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes or the fire in Fort McMurray a couple of years ago, etc. Those kind of programs are worth their weight in gold. Like all charities, I think, in Canada right now with the pandemic, they're all suffering horribly from lack of funds, and a lot of them are close to disappearing. And with that, the support to those soldiers. So try to get those organizations on some kind of solid footing to go forward here, because our veterans need them.
No doubt.
Pete, you and I have been very fortunate that we've had some connection with armed forces through the years, through our programs and whatnot. And I got to tell you, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, you're more capable of doing it yourself, but some of the most touching moments in my career, in our careers here with Fishing Canada Television, have involved our troops, have involved soldiers, have involved whether you know it's veterans or some of the kids who are in it now. Every time that we are in a scenario where there's a Canadian soldier involved, it's the most moving moment imaginable. These are special people. These are very special. Whether it's a 18-year-old kid at Meaford base training or a veteran who's been through a couple of wars, these are not ordinary people. So how they can be ignored is still just. And
they treat us with the ultimate in respect, right? When Andy and I walk through where we work with any of these people, it's unbelievable. Like, yes, sir. No, like it's a different world. They are just so good-hearted people too, as you know.
Angelo and Pete, I had the privilege and delight throughout I was a soldier all my life. I still think of myself as a soldier, just one not wearing a uniform anymore, I guess. And I had the privilege and the absolute delight of soldiering with the kind of people you're talking about here, those sons and daughters of Canada, on an hourly, daily basis. And when I, as a senior commander in later years in particular, when I got worn down and when I was fatigued, my cure for that was to get out amongst those young men and women wherever they might be, on a base in Canada, somewhere in the north, on a post in Afghanistan, on a ship at sea or an airplane in the air, and I got fired up all over again. If I was tired because of the little bureaucratic battles in Ottawa, I'd go off, and in literally hours, I would be recharged, and I'd go back to Ottawa, not only ready to get into a battle, but actually go back to Ottawa so inspired that I'd go looking for fights to get into so I could win them. And it was because of those young men and women. And they fired you up. They had no reverse on that, right?
That's awesome.
They just believed in our nation like nobody else. They were proud of that maple leaf on their shoulder. They looked after each other. And it didn't matter to them, man or woman, or the color of your skin, or what your orientation, your sexual orientation, or your gender. It mattered not. You were doing your job. You were part of the team. They'd look after you right to death's door. And you get inspired by those kinds of kids. They built our nation, right?
And they're so unassuming, Rick? They're unassuming is the only way I can describe them. They're not looking for anything. They're not wanting a pat on the back. They're just great people.
And I'll bet you the military, Rick would be the guy to tell us about this. The military has turned a lot of those people into that too, because they might not have been that way their whole life. They might not have been so respectful, et cetera, but the military showed them the way, and all of a sudden they became such better people by doing that. I'm sure, Rick, you've seen hundreds of kids like that.
I remember one of our great sergeant majors one time talking to Prime Minister Paul Martin, and Prime Minister Martin was asking him, what kind of Canadian boy or girl were you looking for to be a soldier? And he said, sir, we just want people with good values. We'll do all the rest. And good Canadian values, and we'll shape everything else. And we had what we call the boa constrictor method of socialization. You put your arm around these young kids when they first join, and you tighten it a little bit more during basic training when you bring them into the ethos of what you're doing and the teamwork, and then you send them to their regiments, and that little arm gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And after a year, 18 months, 24 months, 98% of them want to stay in the military for the rest of their life. And as a result, the military gets to pick and choose who they want, and you have nothing but the best campers, the best men and women in Canada from which to pick, and they develop, they're proud, they're confident, which is, what a lot of young men and women don't have, because they've been through so much and they've succeeded because you run them hard through the training just to see what kind of stuff they're made of, and you reinforce that strength each time, each step, and they're confident because they know they've conquered tough times. They can get through tough things. They know how to do it individually. They know how to work with a team. They know the importance of humor when you're tired and wet and cold and mosquitoes are flocking around you, and they know how much it means to be part of that, that regimental family, that military family. And then if you should happen to support just a little bit their families outside of that, their personal families who stand beside them during the toughest of time, man, these folks want to be with you for the rest of their life. And it's their experience, and they become the awesome Canadians, Pete and Angelo, that you just described.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
we've had so many moments. One of them I shared with you on that episode that we shot in Newfoundland together, Rick, about a young soldier that Pete and I were doing a commercial someplace in northern Ontario, and this brought me to tears. The story that this guy told us was just touching. I think we've got the video of it here somewhere.
So, Rick, we were earlier this year. We were shooting up in northwestern Ontario, and we're in this little town and doing a promo in front of a general store. And the sergeant came over and introduced himself, and he said that he wanted to come over and thank Pete and I because we were a great help to him in Afghanistan. I said, what do you mean?
Back in 2006, I was over in Afghanistan, and me and a few other friends, of course, we did a lot of time outside of Kandahar, and when we got our opportunity to get back into Kandahar, we'd watch your show, and it gave us a lot of inspiration.
And they saw this episode that we shot on a little lake called Hasty Lake.
Yep.
And he said to the other boys, he says, boys, he says, when we get out of this mess, we've got to go to Hasty Lake.
And we did in 2007. And it was September, and it was just a wonderful experience. And even though we did catch some nice fish, I think it was just the fact that we were there, floating around the same lake that you and Pete were, really made it special for us. And I want to thank you, and my friends do as well, I'm sure.
And it moved me so much.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm telling you, I was
Absolutely.
just completely floored.
People have to have something that they look forward to, anticipate with eagerness, love to, wait to get to.
Yeah.
And whether that's coming home to family, or coming home to go fishing, or coming home to go skidooing, or any of those things. And when you do something which allows them to focus on it, you make a difference in them and their lives and how they get to a mission like that and how they come back healthy and safe and sound and sane and ready to get on and live the rest of their life, a normal life, if you will, back there, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. You have to have those things to focus on.
I'm telling you, it just moved us.
Well, that brings back memories. That was,
Yeah, I forgot.
and I tell Pete this all the time. That not for the fishing, but that was probably one of the most memorable shoots that I've ever had the privilege and honor to be on. And I mean, I'm not saying that because you're here with us now, Rick. I tell this story all the time. The fishing wasn't spectacular.
No, it was not.
It was tough. Let's be honest about it. But it is such a memorable experience, and I thank you for that because it was you made it all happen. It was. And by the way, Pete, I think I told you this guy's a rock star in Newfoundland. This guy is a rock star. When people hear that General Hillier is going to be in town, they start assembling. It was wild.
Well, you have to be a rock star if you dress like that every night at this time of night.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
You got to dress the part.
Okay, let's get talking a little bit about. I want to know Rick's history in fishing. I mean, this is obviously this is a fishing program, and we know Rick loves fishing. Tell the audience, Rick, a little bit of your history.
I grew up here in Newfoundland fishing, right? Fishing up on every pond and small lake in Newfoundland, and there are a million of them, is teeming with trout. Salmon River runs right into the little community where I grew up, where I am right now in Campbellton, Newfoundland. Level 2 river here, so grew up salmon fishing and grew up fishing for cod on the water. And actually, for a couple of years, doing a little tiny bit of lobster trapping and some of those other things. I was never a full-time fisherman, obviously. Lots of people around here did that as a livelihood, and I left home pretty young, but started off here, fishing here in Newfoundland. And so that's what I've now come back to, actually, those same ponds and lakes when I can get back here at the appropriate time of the year, salmon fishing in that river, and of course cod fishing, as we talked about right at the start. That's a passion with me. I love it. We love it on the ocean every single day during the fishery season when it's open here, and we're out there. And every friend that we get to come visit with us, we got them out on the ocean trying to catch fish. But I say to them when we go a long ways out in the ocean here, and I say, okay, I just got to tell you one thing first, right? We're out in the North Atlantic here, and the current's all going. The next stop is kind of Iceland or Ireland. So if we break down, just remember you're in the boat with General Rick Hillier. And if I got on the net and said, hey, General Rick Hillier out here, we're broke down and we need a tow from the Coast Guard or search and rescue, in 10 minutes, that would be right around Newfoundland and Labrador, and I'd never live it down. So I tell everybody gets in the boat, listen, prepare to die if we break down, okay? We're not calling for help.
Oh, that's awesome. That is a great story.
That's true.
It is.
I said it earlier on. We had a poll, Rick. Which of our maritime provinces would you either like to fish in or have fished in? And Newfoundland was one of them. And I said to people, unless you've been there, fishing in Newfoundland is different. It's different, and I don't mean I don't even know how I mean that, to be honest with you. It's more about the experience. There is so much more to it than just catching a fish when you're down there. Obviously, the people are the most genuine and open and friendly folks I say on the planet, and I don't care where you're from. You're never going to find anybody that is kinder than a Newfie. They're unbelievable and respectful people, and that adds to the fishing experience. It's all you know what I mean. It just adds to it. So it's not the fishing; it's really the entire package that makes it.
Angelo, I saw the poll, and for those who want to fish in Newfoundland, we're quite happy to be rated number 3 in the Maritimes. So it leaves the rivers uncrowded for us, obviously, right? But here's what I would say. I love Nova Scotia, and I love New Brunswick, and I love the province of PEI. But when you go there to fish, you're just dipping your finger into the population, into the culture, into the people. When you come to Newfoundland to fish, you're jumping into the ocean with them. And you're jumping into the population and the experience of that culture, the music, the food, the generosity, the friendliness, the inquisitiveness of the people here. Because we want to know everything about you if you've come from outside of the province. That's all part of the fishing trip, and that's equal or more in value than actually time on the water, dipping your hook, so to speak, here. So it's a full body experience. It's a holistic experience here in Newfoundland to go fishing. But something, we're going to change it now. We've got the best advertising I think that you could possibly have for tourism Newfoundland, hospitality Newfoundland, and phone John and come here. It's wonderful. And we're a little bit off the beaten track, and that is a little bit of a factor. We know that. We understand that, but we'll get more.
Are you open for business down there right now?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
No, I mean, you cannot, we're part of the Atlantic bubble. Newfoundland, there's a very famous song in Newfoundland, thank God we're surrounded by water. We kind of like that about right now.
Right now.
Newfoundland is probably the safest place in the world to be right now with the pandemic. We got minuscule number of cases, almost all travel related. So when you come in, you have to either be a resident here, a worker, or own property here. And when you come here to self-isolate for 2 weeks to start with. But it feels very normal here. Yes, everybody's wearing masks. Yes, people are, social distancing and washing their hands and all those good things. But still, the stores are open, the gymnasiums are open. People are doing things, being careful, but doing things. And we feel very safe here, and we're not careless or complacent, just safe.
Jack,
hey, I'm going to give you something. You guys probably both know. Rick won't know this for sure, but Ange, I don't know if you know this or not. I have never been to Newfoundland in my life.
No, I know.
And I've never fished in Newfoundland in my life.
And yet people mistake you for a Newfie all the time.
Everybody. That's what I was going to say. Everybody asks, hey, Pete, where are you from in the rock there? Hey, bye. They all ask me that. I worked with so many guys, Newfoundlanders in construction. They all said, "Oh, where are you from over there?" I was born in Toronto, but
You know, we have
Oh,
100,000
yeah.
Newfoundlanders in Toronto. They must have infected you just a little bit.
Oh, I have the best work partners, the best work stories. I can't go into them, but the best work partners by far in my life were the Newfoundlanders. We had a riot. They made a work day go by real quick.
There you go, right there. Enjoy what you're doing. Have a sense of humor. It does make the workday go by quickly, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
By the way, Jack Summers says he's going to Newfoundland right after the pandemic, and I'm headed with you. So make sure you let me know when you're going, buddy.
And listen, and you have to come in. You have to come in a little earlier than the last time you came. Middle late August is a little late for the trout and the salmon fishery. The cod fishery is a little bit more extended now, but early August, late July, early August, great time to be here for the salmon. Great time to be here for the trouting, and great time to be here for the cod fishery. And no reason not to partake in all three.
You know me, Rick. I'm a straight shooter. Okay, there's a reason why I came in August. I wanted to avoid those black flies. My God.
So that means you have to come in January, and really, that's not fun.
I remember shooting on. I don't know whether you're familiar with it, Rick. The Little Con River, I think it's called. Little Con River.
Of course.
I have never. It was great fishery, but I have never in my life encountered black flies.
Really, eh?
Oh, Pete, they were the only way I can describe it is overwhelming. It was just you couldn't even shoot.
And
the cameramen couldn't work. They were just completely overwhelmed. And that was early. I think that was I want to say early June sometime. But anyway,
wow.
We have black flies everywhere. Not to worry.
Rick, what's your favorite fish to go for? Let's say around Newfoundland and then worldwide or wherever.
And it's only the ones around Newfoundland. I love salmon fishing, Atlantic salmon. I've had a bunch of experiences at the fly-in fishing cottages on the Eagle River, for example, and Park Lake down in Labrador. And oh my goodness, I think 3 days fishing. I had, I think, 48 salmon on it, and you're talking salmon, 15 to 25 pounds kind of salmon. The Atlantic fresh, and that's they were only about like 10 to 20, maybe 25 kilometers in from the ocean. So they're still invigorated. Their energy levels are way high. So you hook a salmon like that, it's the most thrilling fight on the river. And in those 3 days, I don't think I went more than maybe 200 meters along the shore of that river. And that many fish, so they got to be that. I love cod fishing. I love being on the ocean. It's not necessarily sport kind of fishing, but hey, we eat what we catch, and I love being on the ocean and fishing, and like getting people introduced to it who come to visit from obviously mainland Canada. Friends of ours who come in. I love doing that, so I enjoy that part of it. And trout fishing is always just fun. Always just fun.
Do you hand jig the cod still? Is that still the normal way for Newfoundlanders?
Yeah, you can hand line, but I use a rod and reel like I would say 95% of the people do now, rod and reel. And we fish anywhere 50 to 150 feet down. And if you hook on a 20-pound codfish at 150 feet down, hey, you got a job.
Yeah,
you're going to know that you're going to know that you hooked a 20-pound fish 150 feet down when you get it in.
And is it still jigging? Is it still like a jigging? Use the jigs, or is there different methods now with rods?
Use a small jigger, sometimes with a little bait on it, something to attract more. But a codfish is a predator, so if they happen to be feeding and you get in their feeding grounds, they like to hang out around the slopes of the cliffs, and of course every island here in the Bay of Notre Dame Bay, for example, where we have our house and where we go fishing. Every island slopes down like a steep mountain slide, so hundreds of feet underwater. And if you can find the right niche along the side there, like I say, in that magic 50 to 150 foot range, they like to hang out around the side there. You get into the midst of them, and you'll catch them if they're feeding. And if they're not, you won't even come close. You'll be out there all day. Wow. So yeah, it's always a challenge, to find out where they are, and of course you're on the ocean, so you're drifting through the fishing ground. So and you get 5 or 6 boats there, and you all close together, and everybody's talking, and telling stories back and forth and hooking the fish, and then you drift through the ground. One boat will start up, move back over to the fishing ground again, upwind, and then the other, and we'll all move back up, a little flotilla. Then you float back through, and then you come together as boats, and people will pass fresh buns and sandwiches and tea and coffee and maybe that excess fish that they have to help you out if you're down one. and it's a social community out there. It's wonderful. It's one of the most magnificent parts of the summer here.
That's fantastic.
I hate to get back to the soldiering thing, but I said at the beginning of the program, not that I hate to get back to. I love the fishing stuff too, but I said at the beginning of the program that you were on the verge of another program that you're working on right now that I'd like to. Well, actually, I'd like to play the video if you'll let us, Rick.
Please, I'd appreciate that immensely.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm General Rick Hillier. I was Canada's Chief of Defence Staff from 2005 to 2008. Those were some of the proudest years of my life, and they were also some of the most difficult years during our war in Afghanistan. I was proud of our troops then, and I'm proud of them now. Everyone was a hero, some more heroic than others. And out of those, some 25 were awarded the Star of Military Valor, our nation's second highest award for valor. Not one of them, however, not a single Canadian soldier who fought in Afghanistan received Canada's highest military honor, the Victoria Cross. It's true, Canada created its Victoria Cross in 1993, and as a nation, we had decided it was time to celebrate our own. Except that we've never done it. We've never awarded Canada's highest honor, the Canadian Victoria Cross, to a Canadian soldier. So today I ask you to join our campaign to award a Canadian Victoria Cross to a soldier or soldiers who you judge deserving. We've identified 10 awesome heroes, each of whom have won the Star of Military Valor for their incredible courage in the face of the enemy. And over the next year, we're going to tell their stories and recommend that at least one of them be awarded a Canadian Victoria Cross. I'm asking you to join me in this noble effort. It will culminate on Remembrance Day 2021, a year from now, when we will bring you a television special that will tell their stories and allow you to judge whether one or more should be awarded a Canadian VC. So please share this video, like our Facebook page, and comment. We'll keep you posted, and we'll share with you those incredible, truly Canadian stories. And now to all of those who are serving, to those who have served, I thank you for that service to this great nation, and to the 37 million Canadians who call it home. I thank you for that service, and I salute you. We remember.
Beauty.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Well done.
Thank you for playing it.
So tell me about this. I'm intrigued by it. So in 1993, when this medal came out, if not our soldiers, who was it brought out for?
Well, it was brought for our soldiers, and it took a step from what was, the British Empire, the British Commonwealth, and the Victoria Cross. And of course, we have just less than 100 Canadians who have won the Victoria Cross in the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. Nobody in Korea. And then in 1993, we decided it should be the Canadian Victoria Cross. We got the medal from the guns that were captured at Crimea in the 1860s. We've made 10 of those Victoria Crosses. They're in the Royal Canadian Mint. We've not awarded one. And we think maybe, just maybe, we underscored, if you will, underestimated the bravery, the valor of some of our soldiers, and it's worth a relook. And we look at what our allies have done. Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain have all awarded Victoria Crosses during actions in Afghanistan. The United States has awarded medals of honor for actions in Afghanistan, and we have not. And we thought maybe myself, several young soldiers, a couple of producers, got a great team put together to look at this and say, we've selected 10 awesome heroes, and we're going to tell their story and tell what their citation sums up in, one small paragraph about what they did on a certain day or days and why that got them the Star of Military Valor. And we're going to say, let's just dig into the facts here a little more. Let's interview some of the people who were with them on that day. Let's, interview some of their commanders and some of their allies who were with them. And let's hear that story and tell it. And now you judge. Maybe that Star of Military Valor, we aimed a little too low. Maybe it should be the Victoria Cross. And why could we not bring pressure to bear to the government of Canada, say, we're going to relook those citations and have a fresh look and perhaps award a Victoria Cross. We think it's
What's
worth
the
it.
criteria for that, Rick? Why hasn't nobody won it or awarded it so far?
Well, first of all, there are a bunch of reasons I believe, and let's say I am guilty. I was the chief of defense staff for 2005 to 2008 during that fighting in Afghanistan. Number one was we were all new to war. I'll tell you that quite frankly. We were all learning from the most junior soldier in combat to commanders like myself, to journalists who were covering the war, to our politicians who were trying to understand what we had to do to achieve things. We were all learning, so perhaps we weren't as well prepared for those kinds of things of the recognition as we should have been, or could have been, or could be now. Number two is it's really tough when you're into the middle of a fight to get the citations and the appropriate write-ups for people's individual bravery and action. And you really, you could perhaps understand it. Something happens on day 27 of a 6-7 month tour of combat, and you hear about it, the act of bravery. It was incredible. You're trying to extract the information from the commanders and the combat. And meanwhile, they're in the midst of one battle after another with casualties and all the things that go with it. It's really tough to get the citations. And thirdly, there's sometimes, I'll take this one. I'll say mea culpa, my fault. Maybe we were a little bit like that infamous French figure skating judge who confessed in the Olympics that she kept her marks for all the Canadian skaters low so she could mark her own nation skaters higher. Maybe we were saving ourselves for that great citation that showed up that never did. And so there are a whole variety of reasons for it. I think no matter what the reason, there's no reason we can't go back and just reassess this and say, maybe we undershot, and maybe we can reassess. And in our reassessment, I actually think that the story would change in one or two cases, perhaps even more, but one or two, and we would see fit as a nation to award the Canadian Victoria Cross. So I think it's a noble effort. I don't think it's much to ask the government to do. We need the Canadian population to be in support of it.
Why do I have the feeling, though, that even though it's a wonderful initiative and should be getting a lot of support, why do I get the feeling that it might not be?
Well, listen, my aim, I never admit failure here. My aim is that we're not going to give anybody a choice to say, hey, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the pressure so intense that somebody's going to have to look at it one way or the other and ask the military to reassess the citations and come forward with new citations, whether they're almost identical or not, but to come forward with it. I don't think Canadians, once they get a chance to hear those incredible stories. I mean, the story of young Private Jess LaRochelle, who was in his observation post and got hit with rocket-propelled grenades on the flank of his company. He's injured, wounded. Some of his fellow soldiers are dead and wounded. The observation post, their bunker, is destroyed, and he stays on the machine gun during an attack by a platoon of Taliban on that flank. He brings fire to bear with the machine gun. He fires single-use rockets to keep the Taliban at bay, knocking them off. And the company commander told me afterwards he went bounding up the hill to that observation post. He said it was destroyed, and he thought everybody inside was dead. And then he could hear the machine gun going. He got on his belly and crawled in, and there was Jess LaRochelle, covered in blood, covered in dirt and grime, with his buddies here, and he was still bringing fire to bear. That kind of incredible individual got the Star of Military Valor. Wouldn't Canadians like to hear a little bit more about that story and the other 9 that we want to bring?
That gives me goosebumps. Just
yeah,
listen.
I just had shivers too. I
would love to see that story.
This young son of Canada, I think he was 19 at the time, may have been 20, but honest to goodness, he looked like a 13-year-old boy. I remember chatting with him. We had invited him to dinner, actually at the Governor General's residence, and chatting with him. And Paolo Accolini was there, one of the Accolini family who owns the Vancouver Canucks, and the Canucks were playing Ottawa in the playoffs here the next night. And he said, I got a couple of tickets. And I said, I can't go. But I said, if you want to give those to somebody really deserving, here's this young guy here with his girlfriend. And so Paolo called him over, and I introduced him, and he gave him the tickets. And afterwards, Jess came to me. He said, sir, I've never been to the I think it was the Canadian Tire Center at the time.
Yeah.
He said, tell me, are the tickets in the lower bowl, are they good tickets, do you think? I said, young man, let me just tell you, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks is giving you a pair of tickets to his team playing the Ottawa Senators. I guarantee you they're going to be good tickets for you and your girlfriend to go, and you go and enjoy it. Just an awesome young Canadian. He's had some tough times because of his injuries, because of what happened that day. But what an incredible story. And Canadians don't know it. We want to tell those stories too. And then we want to make this a pilot of more shows that tell stories of Smokey Smith, the Victoria Cross winner, of Padre John Foote, who won the Victoria Cross at Dieppe with such incredible valor and courage, and Piper Richardson, who during the Battle of the Somme, we talked about this earlier with Gord's grandfather, who got up on the trenches and piped his company into action by firing them up by playing the bagpipes, and several days later was killed while carrying wounded soldiers back to the first aid post. We want to be able to tell their stories because Canadians don't know who built our country and what incredible people they were, and could get inspired by them. I think that's what's most important.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah. If you can't get inspired by stuff like that, there's no hope for you, for sure.
And that's one, I call it a noble effort, and that's why we believe it is. And I'll do what I possibly can here to be able to tell their stories.
And we will do.
And we will too. I'd like to offer you our Pine Post production services. If you should need them down the road for this project, please reach out to us. I would like to donate our time and effort and our people to be a part of something like that. It'd be fantastic. So,
Angelo, that's a generous offer. Thank you, because right now we've got a vision. We've got the incredible, wealthy stories to tell about those incredible sons and daughters, and we have no money. So we're gonna need the third pillar in that post here.
How's that going to change? How are we going to change that?
Well, we've just started, so we're reaching out to a variety of the organizations that do documentaries. We're going to do that first. Well, we want to reach out to foundations and to Canadians who are perhaps a little more affluent than others and who have been supportive of good things for our nation in the past. And we're going to need people to give. And then maybe we'll reach out to Canadians at large and try a GoFundMe approach for some of the money. We're going to need quite a bit of idea to do this properly.
Once again, if we can help in that area, by all means, don't feel like you're a stranger. You're part of our family, and we would certainly like to help in this cause.
As we say in the Army, hoo-ah.
Thank you.
It. Right there, brother.
Can we just take? I mean, there's people asking all kinds of stuff. Can we just take a few questions from folks?
I'd be delighted.
Mike, if you want to just throw some stuff up, or for those of you viewing, if you got any questions for General Hillier, by all means, we'll keep this going for a few minutes more, and we'll take it from there.
There's lots of comments. I mean, there's tons and tons of comments, and they're all this, basically support, 100% for support, et cetera, right? So,
Rick, just while we're waiting, do you have supporting visuals for these pieces?
Yeah, we have a lot, and one of the things we're going to do as we start, literally 2 days ago, we kind of launched this, right? So we're still in very, very, very nascent stages here, and so what we're doing is reaching out. There's a lot of stuff in the combat camera in the Canadian Forces, a lot of video and footage and pictures from the fighting and from the war in Afghanistan. Other individual photographers or news agencies that were there also have a lot, so we can get some of that. But we're also going to reach out to a lot of our individual soldiers, and we're going to ask them for their videos and pictures for those tours, because we know that there's so much of that out there that's been untapped up till now, and we want to be able to use that. So yeah, we have access to a lot. We know there's an enormous amount out there. The Canadian Forces will make the combat camera footage available for us, and that's most important. We can't do it without that. But then we're open. Our troops our veterans will pile in and show some of their private stuff.
Well, I think you're going to see some stuff coming out of the woodwork, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah, we'd be happy for that. That's for sure.
Can you imagine like the body cams off these guys, or whoever the soldiers were out there wearing their cameras and getting that footage? Oh my God, that would be something.
Yeah, you see some of that when you go on to YouTube or Facebook and those things, and you see some of those things. And we know there's a lot of footage. We want to be able to get access to what's important, and I think at the end of it, we'll find that we've got so much that it'll be just difficult to carve down into that small niche for each of the 10 stories that we'll have to tell.
Yeah.
A good friend wants to know, how effective was Canada's mission in Afghanistan overall? How would you rate it?
Well, like I don't have a rating that goes from 0 to 100. Here's what I would tell you. I think it was incredibly effective in giving the Afghans time when the Taliban was certainly at its strongest to actually not be intimidated by them, and to give them time to actually start building some of the own institutions in the country that they had destroyed over the previous 35, 40 years. Afghanistan had been actually a fairly stable country, a fairly peaceful country, and compared in that Southwest Asia area, a fairly prosperous country. All that got destroyed over about 30 years. And what we were doing, I think, was keeping the Taliban off balance enough that they could actually start building and rebuilding some of those institutions. And whether it was their Ministry of Finance that could do budgeting process, their Ministry of Employment to actually try to rebuild some of the economy, the Minister of Agriculture to rebuild the agriculture industry that had been destroyed, or building an army or building a police force, we gave them time to do a good part of that. It's not finished work. It's imperfect at very best, but compared to where they were in the year 2001, it's absolutely incredible. The number of children in school, the number of girls in school for the first time in decades, the number of people who've gone to university and those kinds of things, the number of women in government. And I met the Minister of Health for Afghanistan, and it's a female surgeon. And she said she wasn't afraid of the Taliban. She carried a big knife, and if they had dared touch her, she would have made them pay, with their lives, kind of thing. And oh my goodness, she inspired me. So I think we gave Afghanistan, and most importantly, we gave Afghans a chance to do some of those things. It's an ongoing work. It won't be finished for 30, 40 years. Somebody keep saying, hey, we want to get in and get out in 5 years. Come on. We are a 150 some odd year old nation. We're still imperfect. We still have problems. We still have corruption. We still have scandals. And when we're curing it. And so it's going to take them a few years longer than that. I think we were successful in giving the Afghans a breathing space, is what I would call it.
Good. Very well put. Ken Johnson wants to know, what networks will the show be featured on? Do you know? Any ideas yet?
No, but we've reached out already. We've reached out to Chorus, and we've reached out to CBC. And, we want to see what people will come back with. We think it's an incredible proposition. And we think, hey, if you're looking for Canadian, footage and Canadian shows, this is as Canadian as you can get, right?
Oh, yeah.
So who wouldn't want this, and who wouldn't want to support it financially? So we're uncertain yet, and that's what we'd like to resolve by, January, get our script and that all put together January, February, March, because we want to get that carefully done. Make sure we talk to the individuals that we want to work with to see that they do want to be part of this, and if not, we'd have to look elsewhere. And then film April, May, June, July kind of thing, get that all put together and be ready to go late August, early September, maybe at the Toronto International Film Festival or something like that, and then be ready to launch formally on 11 November. But, hey, I want to do this for our sons and daughters in uniform. I want to tell their stories with this great team we put together and do it, therefore, for all Canadians.
Nice.
There's an interesting question from Richard. Do you mind working with the USA?
Some of the greatest moments in my life, the most positive experiences of all, the things that actually made me feel good came while working with the United States of America and Americans. I'll just give you this one example. Canada was in great difficulty in southern Afghanistan because I felt personally, and I know our government did, but I felt personally that NATO was not doing what it said would do in southern Afghanistan when we said we were going in as part of a NATO force. And in other words, they were short battalions in the south that should have been there that weren't. And I unloaded at one of the meetings at NATO. And, everybody, all the other chiefs of defense staff from the 28 nations many of them were kind of looking at the table and saying, oh, I wish he'd shut up or whatever. And after I stopped, it was silence in the room, except for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from the United States of America, who said, the United States of America will not stand by and see our great friend and ally, Canada, in trouble in the south. And the next day, a battalion moved in from Iraq to start working and give the extra firepower, literally, in the south. And additional resources started flowing into Afghanistan. Wow. We fought side by side, brother and sister, with our American friends and allies. And it was wonderful in almost every circumstance. And I think they probably say exactly the same thing.
Wow. Great story.
Blood brothers and sisters, quite literally.
Nice.
All right, last one. Russell wants to wants to tell you he's a father of 3 children in elementary school. Is there any future education of new stories to help educate and let little people know what a true hero is?
Well, Russell, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell those stories of Canadian heroes. Again, Padre Booth, a chaplain, one of the most mild-mannered people, quietest individual you'd ever meet in your life. And on the 19th of August, 1942, on the beach of Dieppe with the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, he started carrying wounded to the shelter of a landing craft that had been destroyed under open fire from the German machine guns and cannon on each side of the cliffs. He did that through the most of the day, and then he carried those wounded. When the tide came in and threatened to drown them, he carried them through the tide, through the water, to the boats to take them offshore. The last boat he got into himself, his commander said, "Hey, Padre, time to go. This is the last boat going back to England." He got in the boat, turned around and got back out of the boat and said to his commander, "These," pointing at the more than 2,000 prisoners of war, Canadian soldiers being taken by the Germans, "these, my flock here, needs me more than they do back in England." And he went into a prisoner of war camp for the next 3 years to serve the men that were taken as prisoners that day. Awarded the Victoria Cross for that, for incredible bravery. He came back to Canada, served as a member of the Legislative Assembly for Ontario, in Queen's Park in Ontario. And I think he died in 1965, but an incredible hero. Russell, we want to tell their stories. We want to be able to articulate them for Canadians from 3 to 300 if people grow that old.
When you hear stories like that, Rick, not to downplay it at all, but it makes our current situation just a little more easy to manage. I mean, those are stories that just they give you goosebumps if you don't get emotional about them.
They were asked to go ashore in the face of fire and almost certain death at times. We're being asked to stay home and sit on the couch. I think we can get this.
Yeah, well said, buddy.
General Hillier, I can't tell you how honored we are that you took the time to join us here the eve of another Remembrance Day, shared it with us, and we're thrilled to call you a friend. And as we said before, anything we can do to help you in your cause, you need but to reach out.
Angela and Pete and Mike also in the background here. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for continuing to be the supporters of Canadian soldiers and veterans and their families that you are. And thanks for the assistance of help. I guarantee you, we will call upon you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Take care, Rick.
See you, Rick. Wow.
Now you know why I came back from that Newfoundland shoot. I was just, you spend 4 days with a man like that in a boat, in a fishing scenario, and the stories that he told Pete.
Yeah.
Because of course I would be poking at him all the time, like, what was your, freakiest thing? What's like, I was constantly, and the stuff he came out with, and
he's such a storyteller too. Like he is unbelievable when he talks. It's just like, oh my God, I'm glued to everything he says.
And I'm not kidding you. This man is a rock star. Everywhere he goes, people line up for days.
And so he should be. And so he should be treated as a rock star. You know what I mean?
I was absolutely humbled to spend that time with him. Just a wonderful guy. And I'll tell you what, the troops have got, as long as Rick is around, the troops have got somebody looking after him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We won't let that memory go.